Hello, this is Tampa Home Talk, and thanks for coming back to Hour 2. We're glad you're here. We have a fun show lined up, just like I promised you at the end of last hour, and I would love to introduce our guest for the hour. We're talking all about innovative and modern container homes, and then we're going to back up and talk about how we got here, right, with regards to building things inside of these container homes. So without further ado, Leo and I would love to introduce our guest for the show. We have Robert Cox. He's the CEO of SunDog Structures.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Yes, thanks.
And we also have Wesley Osborne. He's the founder of SunDog Structures.
President and co-founder with Robert. Yes.
So how did you guys, I got to jump into the how, like when you tell me about your background, what did you guys do and how did you end up going into the container home model type thing? And we'll talk about what you do.
Basically, Robert and I are architects by trade. We started an architecture firm about 7 years ago. And we both had backgrounds in multiple types of design, from commercial to residential, large scale, small scale. But a lot of interest.
Did you work for the same company? Is that how you ended up?
Yeah, well,
okay.
we years ago, we worked together. We came back together about 7 or 8 years ago and founded an architecture firm and started our own business.
Got it, okay.
And so we started doing some designs with cargo containers, got a lot of interest. A lot of clients were coming to us looking for these types of dwellings, either houses or commercial space.
What made you think about doing that?
I studied it back in school. Robert did film set design and did a lot of designs with cargo containers as kind of backdrops and different types of things. And so we really just started thinking of creative ideas of what we could do with these things. So
what was the first thing we ever built?
The first one was the Pinellas Park Live Work, and this was a product that was, we had a lot of groups that were looking at trying to do this, but nobody pulled the trigger, and we got a call from a producer from HGTV, and they indicated that, if you can build this thing, we'll document it and get it on HGTV, and that kind of was our impetus for, really, and
it was exciting.
It was a lot, more response than we could have ever imagined, and really kind of helped to launch the company and get us moving.
So the first thing you built was, what did we document, what did we build?
Yeah, it's about a 2,070 square foot live work, so it was a downstairs gallery and studio and upstairs apartment. So we had a vertical tower on that one, which was really great, because it serves as signage and has a kind of a viewport into it at the second level. So it was part of Pinellas Park's vision of trying to bring an arts district into the area, and it really was a good.
So was it a commercial structure you're building?
It was
mixed use, yeah. So it's a residence on top and then a gallery on the bottom. So it was on a main thoroughfare. It's in Pinellas Park on Park Boulevard, so it's very highly visible. So that vertical tower, we took a container and turned it on end. Really became a nice branding element, and it got a lot of attention. And so it's just it was a really unique structure.
Wow. So you literally stacked 2 shipping containers on top of the other.
Well, it's actually it was 7 containers altogether. This build. So it was multiple containers. If you think of these, they're like life-size Legos, and so we can combine as many as you want.
Do they stack together that easily?
Oh, absolutely. Think about them. I mean, they're on
tanker ship.
Yeah, they're on a deck of ships.
I need to go physically see it, I guess, to wrap my brain around it.
Right.
Well, in this case, we overhung it, so it created a really nice kind of canopy at the entryway.
So what does that mean? Can you describe that for the person listening?
Yeah. So the bottom row, these are all horizontal containers. We only had one vertical tower at the front, which is the entry element, but the other containers we pushed over about 8 feet, so it creates a canopy for the underside at the front, but it created a second level deck at the back, so it kind of has a way to offset that.
So the vertical one, is that literally a shipping container on its side?
Yes.
Like up? Okay.
So you take it and just turn it vertical, and we created a 30, we actually cut it down. A container is normally 40 feet in length, so we cut this one down to 30 feet to be within the height restriction that was needed for the building, but it's a 30-foot tower right on the street edge.
So these are made from steel, right, the containers?
Yes.
They're pretty heavy, I would imagine.
Yeah, about 8,000 pounds.
For one.
They're made with the same steel that bridges are constructed with, so they're designed for, a 20-year lifespan of, holding 60,000 pounds of cargo, in high seas. So they're stronger than really any building that you can imagine. If you think, trying to pick your house up with a crane, it would crumble, but these things are, extraordinarily strong.
So how do you get the flow and the design to really be like appealing, right? You said you have 7 shipping containers kind of all piggybacked, interlocked like Legos.
Well, think about it as, so you're taking these containers, you're assembling them and combining them together, and you're removing all the interior walls. So then it's an open floor plan, and we can design them in any configuration, just like any traditional home.
It doesn't compromise the integrity of the way they lock together?
No, so when we remove the walls, we add structure back in.
Okay.
So you'll add a beam in. If you're removing a wall section, you'll add a member in that takes that structural capacity back and puts it back in.
Like this, most of the time when in a block house or a brick house, when you want to cut in doors and windows, we want to add steel. So if this thing is all steel to begin with, I'm happy.
Right, exactly, and that's one of the great things about this. You're getting a steel structure, which is one of the highest and best types of construction methods there are, better than stick frame housing or better than so called stick frame, but wood frame housing. So this is on par, if not surpassing what block construction or concrete construction would be.
So how long did it take you to build the house with 7 containers that was 2,700 square feet?
It had some starts and stops, but overall the construction sequence was about 3 months. So it's a little bit shorter than a typical construction project. We're able to do some things in the shop. The first one we built with, used containers in the field, so it wasn't as quick. We had a contractor that was working with us on that, and so after that experience, we decided, this has to be done in a shop. We have some really extraordinary craftsmen, who are able to really, work wonders with big heavy equipment and welders and torches and cutters, and so.
So how was the permitting process for that?
Well,
being
pioneers, it has had its challenges,
sure.
But it's all about educating the building departments, the local municipalities, the inspectors, that these are on par and surpass Florida building codes. They meet all the requirements. All the structural engineering is done. All of the.
How did you convince them of that? What did you say?
It was a long process, and a lot of municipalities. Some have have been very open and accepting of it. Others have been very difficult. Some of our first permits took up to a year and a half to get for these projects.
But now they're really flowing. There's been kind of a big change in how the cities are perceiving these, and they're understanding that, once one jurisdiction does it, then the other says, oh, okay, let's drive over there and take a look at this, and it just kind of snowballs from there.
They've been doing this in Europe for a long time. There's a company called Campo, and they make small 8x10s, and you basically just decide how many you want, and they combine them together, and
Absolutely.
Whole little steel container.
We're kind of behind the curve if you think about it. Europe has been doing it. Australia, they're very prevalent. If you also think about it, it's just a repackaging of traditional building materials.
Yeah.
It's steel, it's concrete, it's wood. We take these steel boxes, we fur them out on the interior with metal framing. They're closed cell spray foam, so they're extremely energy efficient.
That's
and then
what I was going to ask. Is are they cold? How's the energy efficiency? So you're putting the spray foam.
They're extremely energy efficient. So we're using closed cell spray foam, which is better than bat insulation that you would have in a traditional building.
Absolutely, yes.
Sometimes they might be too energy efficient.
That's you hit a good point.
What do you mean?
Add fresh air makeup.
Yeah.
We add like a vent or something, like a dryer vent, to allow fresh air to kind of flow through.
We're running into this a lot in new construction inspections, and people think like, well, ACs aren't sized big enough, and the ACs are actually small because of how efficient and tight these houses are. The Florida Building Code has an air turnover, which says that in a given hour, air needs to turn over between 3 and 5 times. That means you need to have the air completely replaced in your house somewhere between 3 and 5 times an hour. And you get these really energy efficient homes with closed cell fill insulation.
They're airtight for the most part.
If you're too tight, you can actually be under. So when you do something called the blower door test, which is required to get a final certificate of occupancy, you could fail there.
So where's the balance in creating the super energy efficient home and actually creating one that meets these building code requirements of fresh airflow?
Right. Well, like we've been building with SIPS homes for quite a long time, and they have been doing those blower tests, and they were actually damaging the houses because they were sealed so tight, so they have some exceptions on that. We don't have like a performance value. SIPS is able to get a performance value, which allows them to use smaller air conditioners, because the hope is that, the air conditioner runs enough to take the moisture out of the air. But if it so if your home is so energy efficient, and it's so sealed tight that it doesn't allow it to run long enough, then the house ends up getting moisture problems. So there's ways to confront that, with like energy recovery systems that, will kind of keep a steady flow of fresh air coming into the house.
When we come back after the break, let's talk a little bit about the construction, and is it cheaper, like the disposability of the containers and all that stuff?
Sure.
You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We'll be back right after this break.
Good morning. Welcome back. This is Leo Kane with Barrel Engineering and Inspection, here with Katrina Madewell and our two guests, Robert Cox and Wesley Osborne from SunDog Structures. And we're all talking about
specializing in container homes.
Yeah, stackable, movable, durable. How many ubbles can I come up with for the container home?
It's interesting. I mean, you say Europe's been doing this for a long time. We're kind of behind the curve, but weren't these containers that come over from shipping kind of like, I thought I saw something somewhere where at one point they were running out of places to put them, or because they're kind of like disposable.
It's kind of that way. We get about 800,000 new containers into the U.S. every year, so it's kind of been piling up over in Los Angeles and in some of the port cities around the country.
Where do they put them?
Mm-hmm. You see the movies with the stacks of them, like 30 high?
Yeah. So the idea is that we're getting them. We use single-use containers because of the way that the cities like to have verification of the procedures of how they were constructed and all of that. So we're kind of getting them brokered to us as they're sent over on the first trip, and the difference is like the new car versus a used car for the quality of the containers. So
why is that?
Well, because if you take a 20-year-old used container, they're dented up, they're beat, they're not quite as square, and we just feel like that's not the product we're trying to offer.
Do they always want to reuse those, like from a shipping perspective?
Well, from a shipping perspective, they are a commodity, and they are put into service, and they're used, and they go back and forth, for quite a few years.
On boat, on train, by truck.
Right. Yeah. So they're definitely utilized, and so if you're using an older used container, by the time we go and have to remediate, fix the dents, cut out the bad spots, fix the rust. They are made out of corten steel, which is what we mentioned what bridges are made out of. So they're naturally rust inhibitive, but they still have to be remediated to be used as a building product. So by the time you have to go through all of that, we've found, and most building departments like the fact that we use single use because it costs just as much to go back and fix these things.
So it's only been used once. It's kind of fresh.
Basically brand new. They've been manufactured usually in 6 months of us.
Is there anything that's shipped in those containers that you can't use that container to build a home?
And that's another reason for going with the single use, is because we verify and understand what's been used in them. They're a more what's the word I'm looking for? They're just more
pristine in a way.
Pristine in a way. The shipping lines want to keep them in good condition. They wouldn't ship anything in them that is going to damage or take that container out of service because it's so valuable.
Yeah, but they aren't valuable enough to ship back empty.
Got it.
So it's something that they're using once and kind of just casting aside.
Mm-hmm. So with the shipping containers, does this mean your construction cost is cheaper, being that you're building most of the construction from a recycled container?
Well, the way we kind of see it is, if you're trying to build a shoebox out of stick frame, you can probably do it cheaper than with a container, because when you buy the container, it's got its cost itself, and then you have to start removing walls and adding steel back in, and it's a pretty serious process.
What is the cost of one of those containers, and what's the size of them?
On the market, the single-use containers are about $5,000.
Okay.
And so if you think about it, they're 320 square feet of floor space, so that right there is about $13 a foot, So we can get them for less if we're buying a bunch, but the used containers are between $2,000 and $2,500 dollars, but, again, the remediation costs really come into play.
Right. So what about if you're building these things or you're using them on waterfront properties? Have you guys done that? And
Absolutely.
Is it meeting all the wind?
We've got several projects that we're on the books right now that we're doing for coastal. We elevate them on traditional foundation systems with columns and cast in place concrete or block and that type of a situation, and then we put the containers up elevated for flood conditions. But they far surpass and exceed wind rating requirements. In fact, we're doing.
Why wouldn't you just stack them? Is there any particular reason?
Because on the ground floor you have to have either flood vents or something that allows for the water to flow through and keep that.
Right, but you couldn't put those in the bottom container? No?
Yeah, you really don't want to have the steel and salt water come into contact.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so you want to elevate that above that floodplain.
And in velocity zones, they want to have kind of sacrificial walls that can just get blown away versus ones that are kind of like could undermine the entire foundation.
And in terms of this kind of coastal approach, one of our larger projects to date that we're working on currently and is in permitting right now, we're doing a 24-unit cottage for the Everglades National Park down in Everglades, South Florida. And it basically that we're rebuilding that because they wanted something that was sustainable that's going to withstand 180-mile-an-hour wind conditions.
So have you guys built any of these container homes where like some of these huge storms have rolled through? Like, have you built anything?
People have been coming to us, and we have not, like areas like Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, all of these things. It would be very, very good to be able to do that. There's a lot of logistics involved that we really haven't been able to tackle as of yet, but it's something that could be amazing.
Like even here, have there been any container homes that you guys have built where the storms went through and wreaked havoc on everything else, and your container home is still standing?
No, we had while we were constructing. We had a project in Tallahassee and one in Mobile, Alabama, and we both basically had a massive hurricane go right between the two, and it was a sleepless night because we didn't have the roofs on yet, of either of those projects, but we were fortunate that it went right between, so we haven't had that instance at this time.
So what kind of roof are you tying into these? Are you doing metal roofs on these?
It can be anything that any traditional roofing system can be incorporated. We utilize SIPS roofing, which we've talked about a little while ago. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with what SIPS are.
What is it?
It's a structurally insulated panel. It's an acronym for SIP. So it's a styrofoam sandwiched in between, and you've got either OSB or cementitious board that creates this structural panel. It's an insulated panel, so that can be utilized as a roof system, a wall system. We can do traditional trusses. We can do metal. We've done steel roofs. So there's multiple options.
So if you're looking at the home, does it have that corrugated metal look on the outside, or like is that part of the character you're leaving, or are you modifying that?
It can.
We use both. We can clad them in any kind of material. So there's a lot of really great cladding products that are out now. They keep getting more and more modern. Or you can go with wood grains, and we do use woods in some cases, but wood becomes a maintenance issue at some point. So some of these synthetic, cementitious board woods, are really kind of up to the standard that we're looking at, for long-term longevity.
And so, but that adds to the cost. And you mentioned cost a little while ago, and it is on par with what traditional construction is in terms of the same materials go into these buildings.
So how's it better? How's it different? Like if someone's looking at traditional building costs, right, with blocks and wood frame trusses and all that sort of stuff compared to a shipping container home, what's the benefit?
In my opinion, there's the two major benefits are strength and speed of construction. With SunDog, we manufacture our products in our facility, so we can be manufacturing your building at the same time your foundation systems are going in, and it can be happening in a lot shorter build cycle.
I should have had one of our appraisers on the show to get their comment to see how they're classifying these.
Yeah.
Because it's really not a manufactured home, and it's really not a site-built home. I don't really know where they would put this.
Modular is the way we approach these is in a modular fashion, and so we can build in our facility. We can have inspections done in the facility, and then ship to site pretty much 80 to 90% complete.
So after they're built, on the property appraiser's website, does it show as manufactured?
No, it doesn't. It shows as a maybe a prefab home, but it also just is listed as a steel and frame construction. Because those are some of the categories that they are already familiar with, and it's kind of on par with block in terms of the considered strength of them.
So what does the engineer say about the strength of the container homes?
Well, I think back to the what is the wolf and the three pigs. You have your stick home.
Your house.
You have your brick house.
My house.
And you have your steel house. So all the little piggies eventually end up in the steel home.
Yeah.
Excellent
I like that
analogy, Leo. That's really good.
And relating to costs, it's when you do things that are more interesting, when you have overhangs and you're twisting, it really, that's where the kind of savings really starts to play in, because if you start to try to do that with conventional construction, it really, the numbers go way up, and it doesn't really impact us in the same way, because these are like almost structural beams in themselves, each of the containers. So, you can get a lot, more interesting and compelling designs.
From an engineering standpoint, you're allowed to cantilever 1/3 of the length of the span.
What does that mean?
I was about to explain that.
Break it down.
That's your overhang.
For me and the person listening.
That's your overhang. So if you have a 40-foot container, you can get 13 to 15 feet on your overhang.
Correct. Yeah, that's about the limits that we've normally achieved, and so you can cantilever them. You create basically a patio entry condition, but what that does on the backside of the building, it creates a deck. So you have a deck space on the top on your second floor, and so there's so many unique and great design features you can add.
Much easier to do by stacking than it is by building, because if you're building a block building, do you want to have the wood? If you're going to try and do a concrete pour to get your same 8-foot by 13-foot deck, that's going to be a lot more money than just stacking.
All right, so I'm going to throw you a curveball and come back after the break. Something really fun that just popped in my head. It'll tie into, was it last week I wasn't here, or the week before? I was listening to you guys. I was in San Diego. I was texting you and nobody was paying attention to me.
Well, that's because we were on the air.
I know. The thing that people yell at me for, and I'm like, yeah, I got it. Okay. All right, it's Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. We'll be back in just a couple minutes to talk more about the shipping container homes. Really cool topic. So exciting. We'll be back for the last half of the show in just a few minutes.
Great, thanks.
Sparkman Wharf down in Channelside.
Welcome back. This is Leo Kane with Barrel Engineering and Inspection. We just got asked a question, kind of off the air, kind of segue in, about if the Sparkman Wharf food court is containers.
It is containers, yes. It was not our project. That was another company that did that. We found out about that project after it had already been awarded, and we here in our backyard. But those are containers, so that is a container park. We've done similar container parks across the area. We've worked with other container manufacturer or container construction companies, as well as we've done our own. We've done one in Spanish Fort, which is a food service venue with like different vendors surrounding a event venue. So for a concert stage, they have like a craft beer bar, a little sushi shop, they have a coffee shop, different things for food service.
Wow.
We've also been involved with one that was just put in Orlando called Boxy Park, which is done in Lake Nona, if you're familiar with that area. So those are very popular right now, are the container parks for food service and event venue type application.
So going back to what we were talking before, I said I was going to throw you guys a little bit of a curveball just because I have to ask. I don't know how this stuff works. I'm in a room full of architects and engineers, so I'll pick your brains on this stuff. But when I was in San Diego, they do a lot of the rooftop pools. So just kind of curious, like if you have these stackable containers, and I heard you say that with the way it stacks becomes your patio and your deck for the outside. Have you done anything like that where you're building pools in these, and are they ever on the second or rooftop floor?
We have a design for one that we're working on right now. We haven't built any container pools at this stage. There's companies who do that. There's one in Canada that's pretty prevalent that, they do some really great stuff, and it just shows, again, the strength and, the ability to
So you're working on the design. Can we talk about it for a minute? Because I'm so curious about it.
Well, yeah, it's something that we were looking at in Homosassa, and it's a really remote project, and they're just wanting to have the ability to kind of look out over the I guess estuary, and sit in the house and then just walk straight out into the pool on the second level.
Yeah, and having the edge, almost like an infinity edge, but then you can also incorporate plexiglass, taking out portions of the steel so that you can see through the pool and out through the.
That's cool.
It's really there's some neat design features and fun things you can do with pools. We haven't constructed any as of yet, but they are very readily doable.
So lifespan on these container homes, like how long do these things last? Is there issues with rust and that kind of stuff, or?
Well, like I mentioned,
go ahead.
Like I mentioned a little while ago, with the corten steel, that's one of the great features of building with containers. Is it's what they make bridges out of. So it's got a natural rust inhibitive property to it. So if you see rust on a container, unless it's been just totally, not maintained, it really doesn't affect the structural integrity of it. It's a patina almost, so it doesn't go through. It rusts. I think they say a millimeter every 100 years if it's just left.
So how do you maintain these?
Yeah, so we provide really high performance coatings on these. So what we're looking at is probably a 10-year life cycle on the initial paint. But things do have to be maintained as in a normal house. So
I imagine you have to use different paint, right? Like the rust and steel paint.
That's what your cladding is. I mean, if you think about it, the steel container is just the box, and then you put hardy board or stucco or wood siding on the outside. You're painting that every 7 to 10 years.
Yeah. It's just like any other building product. It's just about good maintenance processes. We do put metal, direct to metal paint on them that is made to be adhered to paint, so it's going to last. So if it's the steel that's exposed and it's painted, or we clad it with, like they say, hardy plank, or we do even a more economical if you want to do wood siding. It's just about maintaining these products like you would do with any other building system.
So it's interesting because I'm sure you have your challenges with regards to financing these. Are most of your customers cash or like?
We have a mix. The banks want to see the assets on the property, so it's kind of a new approach for them where we're building in the factory at the same time the site work is being done. So the banks that we've been working with have shown us a good deal of flexibility that we're able to get draw schedules that are outside their normal approach.
We're talking about how the charter banks, the credit unions would be a better
that's usually
option.
the more aggressive banks, the credit unions that are open and willing to lend to these types of products. A lot of the traditional lending institutions are still on the back, kind of waiting to see.
They've went so automated. I think a lot of the bigger banks have just went so automated in terms of if it goes through AUS, it's done. We're not going to operate with any brain in between. Like since the housing collapse, that's kind of what we've seen.
Yeah, construction to perm has been difficult.
Well, because you had traditional underwriters actually underwriting these files, right? And a lot of that has been removed since the collapse. That's probably why we're not seeing as many construction perm loans in the market now as we should have seen by now.
Yeah, so we're working on approaches with different banks that are going to hopefully allow us to get a lot more customers in with 10% or less down potentially. Everybody that we're working with is typically around 20%, or their land goes against the cost of the home, and that's what kind of helps to secure the asset.
Right.
So
because they can use if they own the land, they can use that as essentially a down payment.
Collateral, yeah.
So is there any concerns with safety on these? I know we talked about like having single-use containers or things that are shipped in those. Out of curiosity, what are some of the things that are shipped in the containers that you guys are now using? Can you give me an example?
They're utilizing the single-use containers. They're brand new, so they're very they're a good commodity for the shipping line. So they're shipping Best Buy TVs in them. You're getting electronics. You're getting a shipment of Michael's Crafts. It's going to be something that is being shipped over, that they're going to be utilizing these containers over and over.
Back when I was doing work in Hialeah, we actually had some equipment for our water treatment plant come in on a container, and I went to a factory, and you're probably familiar with this factory down there, that they receive shipping containers all the time. And I would walk in and literally see, just imagine something about the size of a Publix filled with nothing but wall-to-wall 55-inch TVs. And
wow.
we're talking and that's not even the whole building. That was just that one lot of that piece of building, and there was 20 of those in a row.
Right before Black Friday.
Yeah,
they all go.
Some were 55-inch TVs, some were 48-inch TVs, but you'd see the container come in. The container opens up, and it's 320 square feet of nothing but Vizio 55-inch TV. Right. They offload them, stack them with the other 5 or 6 containers worth of TVs, and you're good to go.
Yeah, one of the considerations is these do have wood floors in them. And when you go from country to country, you have to termite treat the floors. And so they do have a protection on those.
So they come already with wood? They're not just steel everywhere?
Just the floors are wood.
Okay.
They're
inch and a quarter,
of tropical hardwoods. And it's really hard to cut through them because they're so super strong. They can hold 60,000 pounds. But since 2006, all the containers have really low VOC or, volatile organic compound, as they say, so it doesn't off-gas that termite treatment, the way that it did
another
back
reason
in
we really push towards
2006.
The single-use containers as well.
Are you using any of the wood floors that come in those as the actual subfloors in the homes?
You can. You can actually put a sealant on those and use those if that's the industrial look that you want. It all depends on the client and what they're looking for. If they want that industrial look, by the time when you combine multiple containers, so there would be different floor transitions. Though you've got steel, you've got part wood. There's areas that would need to be levelized, but you can do that with a clear coat. But a lot of the time we will pour in a lightweight concrete topping into the floor. So you've got a concrete floor that you can then put tile on. You can put carpet on. You can do whatever you want.
Just treat the concrete.
Or treat the concrete and stain it. Yeah.
How do you keep those from cracking in the future?
Well, a lot of the concrete that we're using is like synthetic concrete, a kind of a gypsum concrete. So they're designed to flex a little bit, and they're really not something that is subject to cracking the way you don't have to put control joints or expansion joints.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was wondering about that. I mean, when you think about the foundation or the footer in a house, they're going to put the rebar, right, to reinforce it. Is it like that in these or no?
They kind of have some of them have fiber inside that, so
mesh.
It just is either
that's usually only over the joints.
Side.
So when we're combining multiple containers, and if we've removed the walls and you're pouring this gypcrete product in, we would put that across the seam. So if there's any type of deflection or flexing between the containers, it'll keep that from any type of.
And how thick is that?
It can be as little as like 1/2 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch.
Up to about 1.5 inches.
Yeah, max. When we cut out the corrugation between, so if you have two containers that are side by side and you want a big open space, we cut the corrugation down to the kind of plate steel at the bottom, but it still has a little bit of that corrugation left unless you want to spend all that time grinding, and it's just easier to just go ahead and pour over top of everything.
So if that's what you're doing, why wouldn't you just cut the bottom out? Is it too much work, or does it make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no need to. I mean, so the structure of a container, the floor, you have the C-purlins that basically create the structure of the container, and that's where a lot of the major strength of the container is. You've got this wood floor, which is the diaphragm, and it creates that massive strength that we want to maintain. So by utilizing that and just topping it with lightweight concrete or a gypcrete product, it's just a perfect way to seal it in and not
But we will
cut that integrity.
We will cut the floors out for stairwells and, reinforce around it, or even for 2-level spaces. When somebody wants kind of an open atrium, we can cut the floor of the top one and the roof of the bottom one, and all you have is the frame in between at 8 foot.
So
yeah, when
designs,
you're doing that for an open atrium, it's not like you're going to put weight in that imaginary space between the two.
Right.
Exactly.
What's the designs of these? Are they pretty contemporary?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's what that's kind of what's the driving factor for our success. We get a lot of leads, from people who are wanting to get modern houses. There's a lot of Neomed product out there. There's, all sorts of craftsmen and different things, and that appeals to, certain consumers, and some people want something really modern, and we have the ability to deliver that. It doesn't make as much sense for us to kind of gingerbread these things, because by the time you do that, you've spent more than you would have to, expose it. And that's an aesthetic that really people are shooting for.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But like Rob mentioned, so if we're totally cladding this and turning it into a craftsman style house, it's really not the best product for that type of a thing, because we're putting all of the added elements onto this which are not necessary. So it is more of a contemporary modern
just for an aesthetic
style
look, a different look.
Yeah.
What's the cost to construct on these? Like when you're all done, I mean, I know it's kind of a really loaded question because it depends on the details that you're putting back into it.
It's very true. It all depends on your fit and finish and the design. We are in the process of creating a standardized model line so that we can have our costs in check, understanding exactly what those are, so it's easier for consumers to understand this is what it's going to cost rather than going a custom design. But we are on par with what traditional construction is, more on the lines of what block construction is. Sometimes maybe about a 15% savings over that.
So I'm sure you built hundreds of these. What's the range in the cost to construct when it's all said and done? Do you have a range?
At the low end, new construction is around $150 a foot, and depending on what people are trying to do, it can go up to the $200 a foot range, but that's been about where we've topped out. Now, some of the waterfront projects are, when you have $75,000 to $100,000 worth of foundation,
that's what drives the cost up on those products.
That makes sense.
And multifamily is an avenue where we're starting to really get into, and
can't wait to talk about that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, Wesley, right after the break.
Okay.
And I'd love to talk about some of the top concerns that your people have with these. Like, what do they ask you initially?
Okay, sure.
You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you.
Well, good morning. Leo Kane here, Barrel Engineering and Inspection with Katrina Madewell. I can't believe we've almost been doing this for 2 hours this morning.
It goes by so quick. Every week we're like, we got 2 hours, now it's gone.
It's gone.
Pat, I am surprised you haven't said anything almost for 2 hours, especially this hour.
I'm hungry.
So you're cranky and you're not going to ask anything? We're talking about shipping container homes and you got nothing?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of them in the ocean that have fallen from ships on the way.
Hey, Pat, if you want, we have donuts and cookies in the back office here. If you want to come, if you want to come grab some.
One of the WCI people brought in donuts yesterday.
Yeah, I'll have to take a flight there.
Come on now. I know you're mad that I'm not going to St. Pete.
I'm not.
Yes.
I would bring him food, and so we do our remote broadcast from our studio, and he's like, I miss you guys.
I have a question. I thought about doing this at one point, but I wound up building my own. But a utility shed, they're real good for storage, and you can dress those up if you just buy them outright, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are looking for outdoor bars and she sheds and, different things. We've been recently.
They don't burn down as easy.
These ones wouldn't burn down as easy.
Right. That's right.
State Farm will love that. The ones with that commercial.
Progressive or State Farm, I don't know.
Yeah, so, there's quite a movement. Some of the local jurisdictions like Seminole Heights has now allowed some of these AHUs or accessory housing units that allow.
I know. I was just going to talk about that because we talked about it early, and I don't think we talked about it on the show yet. The in-law suites.
Yeah. So we're doing a couple 320s right now in Gulfport and a couple other locations. And
so 320s, 320 square feet accessory dwelling.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are two 20-foot containers that we put side by side, and it's really. One container is very difficult for a living space, so you really have to kind of like put two together and open them up between them to have like a normal functional bedroom.
8 foot wide is
I thought we said they were 40 feet. But
they're 40 foot in length, but 8 foot wide. So by
Okay.
a single container, HUD requirements for a bedroom is 10 foot minimum.
Just 9 by 7.
Or something of that nature. So
really
you
kind of
be able to circle a bed and have a bed in there and make it a conducive bedroom is that's why we do the combining of containers.
You
for
have
the
to
most
do
part.
HUD Handbook 4000.1, minimum property standards.
How do you know this over me? I don't even understand this.
Minimum property 20203K.
All right.
I have, but I don't remember that stuff.
I know.
Look it up when I need it.
have that whole 750-page document memorized. Anyway.
Of course you do.
So, to meet the minimum property standards, you would have to, at a minimum, have two containers smushed together.
So 2 containers smushed together is how many square feet? 300 and
Well, if it's a 40 foot container, that would be a 640 square foot.
Yeah.
And so which ones are you doing? The 300 or the
320s, if we're doing a 320, it needs to be two 20s together.
Right.
So it's a square, and that would give you 320 square feet of livable space.
Yeah,
So-
so
It's a
16
teeny
by
home.
20 foot.
What's are you finding those are pretty easy to get done? And your challenge is the kitchen, right? You can't put a kitchen in? Is
They're
that
more of a backyard type of a living unit if it's a pool house or potentially an assisted living for your in-laws.
We're
or
gonna
something
see more and more of this.
that
We talk
nature.
about it all the
Exactly,
time.
and that's what a big market that people are really coming to us for to look at.
Kind of a studio with a kitchenette.
What's the cost on that? I want to put one of these in my house. I totally do. I'm not kidding. So 300 square feet to 640 square feet, roughly. What's the cost for basic?
It depends what's in them, but they can probably be in around the $45,000 to $65,000 range for a small living unit with your bathroom and your kitchenette and living space.
A teeny home.
Forget redoing my pool. I'm putting in one of these.
Yeah, it's closer to like $200 a foot when you get really small because they have the plumbing, they have electrical, they have HVAC, all the things
That
are
scares people when they hear that
larger
dollar
house.
per square foot, but it's because of everything being combined in a small
It's one
space.
of those things where you have to have certain features that you'd have in all houses.
Right.
So
You got your bathrooms, your kitchens,
you have to have
your
a
AC.
kitchen, a bathroom, and AC, and those are going to be your expensive things. So the larger
But
your house, the lower the cost.
Where you run into some of the challenges, though, like with the county and the municipalities, if it has a kitchen, they want to call it a multi-family 2-unit dwelling, right? Am I right with that?
Well, that's why, some of the communities are looking at accessory structures, for in-law suites, and under 500 square foot, or in some cities it's 750
So it depends
square feet.
on the municipality what it has to be under.
I mean, for City of Tampa, for instance, all you would have to do is not have a stove and not have a full-size sink, and you can have a fully functional kitchenette in the back.
Yep. Yeah. And some people are looking at it for bars and music studios and different things as well, so we're kind of like bridging out a little bit into other verticals, but
Well, and the other thing that's nice
we
about
could have built a radio studio in a shipping container.
You absolutely could.
But we're in an office park.
The thing is that being in a backyard or being a smaller dwelling unit as well, a lot of people, you can either get a home equity loan or you can actually pay cash for something that's a smaller unit like this. So it's an easier thing for people and it's a bigger market where people are really looking for adding space to their existing house.
Have you guys built quite a few of these? Or are you just starting to build these?
I think we have 3 right now that we're working
those
on.
Smaller units, and we're developing more. Like we've been talking about our modular line. We're really developing a lot of the smaller units that people are really interested in.
Like the tiny homes. Is it sort of on the
kind of a tiny
That
home?
would kind of qualify in that space.
Anything over most
but they're
banks.
permanent, right?
And
Not wheels on them.
No, these are all on
Yeah.
foundations, welded to permanent weld plates. So they're permanent structures.
Where are you able to put those? Because I'm finding a little bit of municipality challenges around the minimum size.
Gulfport, Seminole Heights, we're doing one that's kind of in the just north of Kennedy, Tampa area.
Okay.
So
North Tampa.
There's
East
not
Tampa.
as much kind of blowback, I think, on something under 500 feet as you may find. But one of the challenges is finding comps for a 640 or a 960. It's
Comps if you're selling it, but people will want it.
That's where the cutoff is for most banks as well, is 1,000 square feet or 960 and
to
up.
be an accessory dwelling?
No, to be a single family home, because they're looking for comps, and most banks won't lend to something if they can't find comps that are for smaller homes. There's not many of those that they can compare them to. Now, if we were talking doing a whole development of these, that would be a different.
They built a lot of 800 and 900 square foot homes in the latter days, but you don't
see those anymore, right?
A lot of 2-1s or those kinds of.
How people raised 5 kids in those homes? I don't know, but they did. It's crazy.
Kids were smaller back then.
Yeah, I guess it feels that way, doesn't it? So what's the minimum threshold usually for it to be an accessory dwelling? I know it depends on where you are, but can you give me an idea on what the municipalities kind of in general are wanting? Is there a minimum, like a maximum size they're allowing?
Maximum would probably be, like Rob was saying, in about the 700 square foot range. So if it's below that, we can do the 160, 320.
So 700 really doesn't fit into what you're doing, right? Because it's like shipping container
640.
size.
It's a 1-1 or a 1.5, something like that.
We go up so each 8x40 is 320 square feet. So if you're looking at planning, you just basically assemble them like Legos and say, okay, I've got 320 square feet times 4 units, 5 units, 6 units, and that's your square foot.
If you want to get some more information on this, just reach us on our off-air number. You can call or text us at 813-377-2775. That's our off-air number, so you won't be on the air. You can call or text. 813-377-2775. We'll get you hooked up with these guys so you can inquire about your question. We loved having you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it.
All right, you're listening to Tampa Home Talk, and remember, love where you live or we're going to fix it. Welcome home. We're out for this week. See you next week.
Thanks, Katrina.